Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us today. This is a compliance-driven talk today. Most of what we'll discuss is required OSHA regulations, but I hope that to also provide you with some insight as to why this is really important. For example, did you know that compliance with the Lockout Tagout standard prevents 120 deaths and about 50,000 injuries? So it's not just about compliance, even though compliance is important. There's a lot more to this than just compliance. I'm Karen Johnson. I want to thank you again for joining us. Now, we're going to get you started with complying with the requirements of this rule. But as always, if you need more help or you have questions, pardon me, please feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to help you anytime. My contact information is right here. So our updated console has many ways to interact with me. Just click the More button to explore and look around at the widgets. Feel free to ask me questions, or if you have a comment or you want to interact with me, you can do that through the questions widget. That's a good way to interact with me. Also, there's the emoji buttons. If you said something we like, that you like, or that, you're engaged with me, go ahead and hit the emojis. I love to see them fly across my screen. It lets me know you're here, you're engaged, that kind of thing. We also have a resources tab, and we've uploaded some resources for you. Also, that's where you'll find the slide deck after 24 hours. So sometime tomorrow, later in the day, you'll see the slide deck. If you want the slide deck, you can get it from there after 24 hours. Okay. So feel free to look around at the widgets. You can minimize them, maximize them, but definitely interact with me through the questions widget. If you have any questions, you can, of course, ask it at any time, but I'm probably going to try to wait till the end. If I can get to it before the end, I absolutely will. But so you have time throughout the webcast to ask your questions. Okay. So again, thanks for coming, and let's get into the reason we're here. How about that? So I want to start out with some case studies to let you know what can happen if the hazardous energy is not properly isolated. So in this one, it involves 3 men who were doing maintenance inside of an asphalt mixer. So one of the employees was still inside the mixer when the power was turned on, thereby starting the mixer. So as you can imagine, that employee that was still in there was killed instantly. So the cause was the failure to disconnect the power source and lock it out. That's the whole reason behind this 1910-147 standard, is to prevent these types of fatalities and injuries. Another case study I have is a cotton gin operator climbed into a jammed cotton cleaner or separator. The toggle switch was controlling the operation of the gin. It was turned off, but the energy wasn't locked out. So for some reason, someone accidentally turned the machine back on, not knowing the operator was inside the gin. His leg was pulled through the feeders or the rollers. So you can imagine what happened. But then again, the cause of that, you guessed it, failure to disconnect the power source and lock it out. So they did a study on servicing equipment injuries that focused, or they found that 80% of the workers surveyed in that study failed to even turn off the equipment before performing the service or the maintenance or the work. There's a difference between turning off a machine and actually disengaging or de-energizing the piece of equipment. When you turn off a control switch, you're still opening a circuit. There is still electrical energy at the switch, and a short in the switch or someone inadvertently turning on the machine can start it running again. Of the 20% of the injured workers who did turn off the machinery, about half of them were injured when someone else, generally a coworker who was unaware that the machine was being serviced, accidentally reactivated the machine. So that's high, 20%. Of those workers who turned off the control switch, another 20% were injured by the energy still in the machine, which should have been blocked or bled off. The moving parts of the machine either continued to coast or the parts moved when the jam was cleared. Another case study I have for you is a table saw was turned off, but the saw blade was still coasting, coming to a stop, and had not completed the stop yet. As the employee began cleaning the machine, his finger was amputated by the blade because he began cleaning it before it came to a full stop. Okay. So I have a knowledge check for you. This is different than a poll question, so you do not have to click on anything, but if you want, you can answer me in the interface, that little questions widget, or you can just shout out the answer to anyone in the room who's listening if you want. So my question is, true or false? OSHA requires employers to establish a written energy control program. Is that true or is that false? What do you think? If you answer true, you're absolutely correct if you have hazardous energy sources in your processes. So what we're going to talk about today is what is hazardous energy, okay? We're going to talk about controlling that hazardous energy and what is lockout tagout. It's not just a matter of turning off the energy. So what are the different types of lockout devices? We're going to show you those and what specific lockout procedures are required. I'm going to go over those with you. And last but not least, training requirements. You have to remember there's 3 different levels to training. You're right, Billy. Thank you for your answer. You got it right. So look, your energy control program has to be written and in place. It sounds more complex than it is, but of course, the more complex your operation, the more to your program. But the purpose of the standard is to address practices and procedures that are necessary to disable the machine or equipment and to control potentially hazardous energy while the machine is being serviced or maintained. Injuries from uncontrolled hazard energy can include electric shock, burns, chemical, even temperature, crushed by, struck by, lacerations, even amputations, fractures, and even broken bones, and anything else you can think of. Look, these types of injuries often are life-altering. They can be disabling and even fatal. So it's best to comply with this 1910-147 standard and implement an energy control program. This is one of those programs where you have to have procedures, and your written procedures can save a life because those are the procedures you need to use to control that energy. Okay? If you have energy sources in your facility, you are required to have this programming. You have to implement it. Your program consists of your procedures for each and every piece of equipment or hazardous energy source that's service or maintenance. It includes employee training, pardon me, and you also have to have procedures for periodic inspections and audits, which are two different things. Okay, so that's the shell of your program. That's where you need to start the elements for your written program. This is to ensure that before service and maintenance is performed, machines and equipment that could unexpectedly start up and become energized or release stored energy and hurt someone is isolated from their energy sources and rendered safe before further work is done. Okay? Say okay. Okay. Now, under this standard, there are 3 main definitions I talked about that I want to go over with you. It is important that everyone know their role and the training required for each individual under this standard for each role. Okay, the training is different for each one as they have different exposures. So we're going to start with the authorized employee. This is the individual who applies a lock or who is doing the service or the maintenance on the machine or equipment. Lockout tagout is used for their protection, and they are responsible for implementing the energy control procedures and performing the work is the authorized person. They're responsible to repair or service machines or equipment. They ensure all energy sources are locked out, and they test the equipment or the machine to verify that residual energy is dissipated. They also are the only ones who can remove their locks or tags following a lockout procedure. I have another knowledge check for you. Ready? Either put it in the interface or you can just shout it out so everybody knows how smart you are. Okay, the affected employees are those responsible for implementing the energy control procedures or performing the service or maintenance activities. True or false? The affected employees are the ones who are responsible for implementing the procedures. True or false? If you answered false, you're right, okay? The affected employee are the individuals who operate or use the machine or the equipment. These employees are not authorized employees, but they're the ones who could accidentally throw a switch or maybe remove a lock, not knowing why it's there. Remember, by definition, anyone working in the area where the machine is being serviced could be an affected employee. Their training is a little bit different, okay? So let's talk about other employees. Other employees are individuals who either are or they may be in the area where the lockout tagout procedures are being used. So their training is a bit different, but it's not as involved as the other two. But what's important to tell them is that they need to recognize your lockout tagout devices and tags and know when something is locked out. So the important thing here is they can recognize when service or maintenance is being done and to not go near that equipment. And Maria and Dan, yep, you're both right. Thank you. So who needs training? This sounds like almost everybody working around machinery, which is true. The reason for this is that everyone working around the machinery, like I just tried to say, should be aware of the hazards of starting up the machinery while someone's doing work, maintenance or repair work. Always remember that authorized employees are trained on specific details of lockout tagout when a procedure is being developed for an individual system. So what's hazardous energy? Well, I'm glad you asked. Stored mechanical movement or hazardous energy means some part of the machine can be moving by electricity, hydraulic fluid, air pressure, water pressure, or even gravity. This energy can sometimes still exist or be stored when the machine is turned off. For example, hydraulic fluid can move machine parts even when the motor or electricity of it is off, if certain valves are open. So if the in this truck photo, I wanted to share with you. This happened many years ago as part of the investigation for corrective action. But this happened many years ago. There was a serviceman working on a truck exactly like this. He didn't chock the bed. When it was raised up, the hydraulics bled out and the bed came down on him. He had most of his body in there. You can imagine what happened to his body when that truck bed came down while he was servicing that equipment. He didn't chock it because he was in a hurry. It was later in the day. He was far from home. He was a contractor servicing that truck. He was far from home. He was in a hurry. He wanted to get back on the road and get home. And he took a shortcut, ended his life. So it's important that everybody who is servicing or repairing or working on equipment, that they understand that all energy sources, even residual, need to be taken care of. Chemicals may not seem like stored energy in the normal sense of the word, but some chemicals like acids would cause injury if it was suddenly sprayed on someone or splashed on someone. Thinking that a pipeline is empty or disconnects a pipe or even opens a valve. So it's important, even chemicals, that they're locked out. Now, when you're trying to identify secondary and stored energy sources, it's just as important for the protection of the employee. So it's a good idea to look for all sources of energy, identify secondary sources of energy, and list those. And remember, you have to have a procedure for each source of hazardous energy. You have to have a lockout, tagout procedure written. And that procedure is important, that every time lockout, tagout is performed, those procedures are followed. That's so nobody misses a step. Okay. So some examples of hazardous energy sources are, some other examples are forklifts with the forks in the up position, steam and hot liquid pipes, fuel lines, such as for natural gas heaters. These examples are considered hazardous because turning them off doesn't guarantee they won't accidentally be turned on again during maintenance or repair work. Can you think of any others that I haven't listed here or said? If so, type them in the interface for me if you don't mind. So look, these are the types of injuries that could be fatal if lockout tagout isn't performed properly. You have electrocution, which I've seen, I've heard of a lot in this industry. Scalding from steam or hot liquids. If any of you have ever seen my Don't Look the Other Way video, you will, that's what happens in that video. That's how he dies. So also chemical burns or poisoning, from machinery. You could have deep cuts, gashes, amputations, crushing injuries, all kinds of life-altering injuries or even fatalities. Yes, gravity, Scott. Absolutely, gravity is a good energy source to be thinking about, and people don't often think of it when they're looking for energy sources to implement procedures. So good answer. So here's another lockout tagout case study in which a man working inside of a supermarket cardboard compactor was crushed to death when the unblocked compactor suddenly came down on top of him. So, and that brings to mind another incident I had that I really want to share with you. Is a few years back, I was doing a walkthrough of one of our accounts in a warehouse. And I heard some commotion behind me. I turned to find a small hatch in the wall, and the hatch door was open. Had that hatch door not been open, I would have never known there was a compactor in there. It was very small, and only a skinny person could get through it. And actually, there was a worker inside of that compactor that went through that hatch, jumping up and down, trying to tamp down boxes. Had I not heard him, I would have never known there was a compactor there. Like I said, the door was pretty small and it was flush, so I had no idea. So the control switch was just outside the door, out of the reach of the worker inside. So the sight of this worker inside of that machine, and especially when I saw the control switch and where it was located and it was not locked out, it kept me up for a while, a few nights in a row. All I did was think about what if. What if I were a compliance officer, or even worse, what if I were a coworker who hit the control button for whatever reason? Maybe I would need a light source and I thought it was a light switch for whatever reason. Well, what I did about the situation there in that moment is I took a picture and I went to my contact at that policyholder, and I reported the incident. They took care of the situation right away. During my return visit, when I went back, I saw that they had implemented new policies and procedures, and even training took place. Also, they posted a sign on the door directing workers to stay out of the compactor. They had no idea that that employee was going in and out of that hatch to tamp down boxes. Okay. So just keep in mind that you don't know why someone would enter a machine, but if it's locked out, tagged out, nobody can start it up and end their life. I have another question. Get ready. So when is lockout tagout required? Is it A, when someone will be servicing or repairing the machinery or equipment? Is it B, the unexpected machinery startup or release of stored energy could cause injury? Is it both A and B, or are you not sure? Okay, let me know in the interface or shout it out. I know you're smart. I know you were listening. And if you answered C, both A and B, you were correct. Okay, good job. Okay, so when is lockout tagout required? Simple. When someone will be servicing or repairing machinery or equipment, and when the unexpected startup of the release of the energy could cause injury. So how is, under this standard, how is service and maintenance defined? And it's when the machine is being used for actual production and service, repair or maintenance work has to be done. So a particular type, the setup is considered a particular type of service to a machine when it's being prepared for production or prepared to be used. In this photo, you see the top photo, the setup person is installing and adjusting the dies for production stamping on a composite material. The problem here is there's no block under the upper die to positively prevent it from coming down. The key in the computer control on the other side of the machine, well, it is on the other side of the machine, then that key prevents the machine activation. So the operator or the person setting it up has very little control or no control as to when that machine is being activated. So what's an energy isolating device? These are also called lockout tagout devices. Regular on and off switches, push buttons, the selector switches, those kinds of things are not energy isolating devices since they can fail. They're not designed for energy isolation. There is one exception. Keep that in mind. And it's on a motor vehicle such as trucks and forklifts. OSHA will accept removal of a key from the ignition as electrical lockout, even though a complete energy isolation measure would be to disconnect the battery. However, just removing the key from the vehicle is enough to lock it out. Now, a lockout device is actually a lock and a key. It's a valve or switch cover that holds an energy isolating or control device in the off position until the lockout device is removed. Lockout has to be done according to the established procedure. Why is that important? Again, you want to follow procedures step by step each and every time you have to perform maintenance on that hazard, where that hazardous energy is located. Oftentimes, we're going through steps of things we do day in and day out. Oftentimes, we get distracted. We may forget where we are in the process and miss a step. It's very important that we follow those procedures each and every time we have to implement lockout tagout. Also, it's important to remember that these devices are standardized for lockout tagout only. They have to be standardized throughout your company. You can't mix and match. You also can't use a standard lock from a Foot Locker or your locker at work. It can't be a personal lock. It is personal to you. It's assigned to you. It has your identification on it. However, you have to use the devices that are designed for lockout tagout. Another one, okay? Lockout devices must be labeled to identify the specific employees authorized to apply and remove them. True or false? What do you think? Do you have to identify the person who applied it? Okay, true or false? If you answer true, you are right. See how smart you guys are? So you, like I said earlier, you have to identify the person who's authorized to apply the lock. And that's important because that is the only person that can remove it, except in an emergency, and we'll identify that later. Even though someone's authorized, they cannot remove someone else's lock. So the only person that can remove a lock is the person that applied the lock, okay? And that's why I used to make sure I had photo IDs designed for the locks, because not everybody knows everybody by name, especially if you have a larger company. But if you can identify by them by sight and to make inquiries about why the lock is still there, then that helps a lot, okay? Now, here's some devices that are part of the Lockout Tagout program. If you don't have an electrical disconnect next to a machine, then you can attach a lock to the electrical panel. There are also individual circuit breaker locks, which can be better than locking out electrical panel cover in an emergency. It may be necessary to get to the panel to shut off breakers other than the one that is locked out. So you don't have to have a lockout tagout procedure for a machine with all its energy controlled by pulling the plug if the worker maintains the exclusive control of the plug. So if that's not the case, the photo on the right shows how to lock out a plug at the end of the electrical cord. So let me repeat that for you. If you can control the plug at all times while you're doing service and repair, for example, I've seen individuals put the plug in their pocket while they're doing it. That's acceptable as a lockout tagout procedure. So if at any time you need to walk away from that, and the machine is still being worked on, then you have to put a plug device on it. Hope that made sense for you. Also, these lockout devices prevent the valves in air, water, gas, or steam lines from being opened. And the video I was referring to earlier is called "I Chose to Look the Other Way," and that's what happened here. The gentleman that was working on the steam lines he didn't want to block it out because he was in a hurry, and he had done it that way for many years, got a face full of steam, and perished. So this is an example of pipe lockouts. A physical block or break in a pipeline prevents steam, gas, or liquids, anything like that, from flowing through the pipe to the area where the maintenance or the work is being done. For example, the pipe to a chemical tank has to be blocked or disconnected before someone goes in to do the repair or the maintenance, and these devices help. So these devices prevent compressed air from flowing through the lines and moving some part of the machinery. These locks prevent anyone from hooking up the lines while maintenance is being done. So OSHA has specific rules regarding support for dump truck bodies or truck beds that raise. It has to be the support or the chalk has to be permanently mounted on the dump truck, as you can see in the photo of the bed. So if pneumatic bleeds out, then the truck body won't come down. So you have to remember anything you can do to not rely on the person to install the chalk is the best option. Now, this photo is an example of group, or also it's called gang lockout tagout, typically used when you have several people doing maintenance or work at the same time on the same process or equipment. Each lock should have clear identification. You know, like I said, a name or photo, but it doesn't have to have a photo. It can just have a name and phone number of who it belongs to. Remember, even in group lockout, nobody can remove another person's lock. It can only be removed by the person who installed it. So now, what's tagout? I'm glad you asked again. It's, in a nutshell, it's a warning. It can't be used in place of a lockout. It can be used with it. It's really a warning device only. Tags cannot be used as a substitute, okay? So they can only be used alone if there's absolutely no other way to positively control the hazardous energy. However, they're often used along with the devices, the lockout devices, as additional warning. Nothing wrong with that. Remember also that a separate sign can be used as warning or information, but if it's used alone, it has to be standardized throughout your company. Now, we discussed the types of locks and tags and when they should be applied. Now let's talk about your energy control, your lockout tagout program, and how it should be put together. This is your jumping off point. Now remember, you're not by yourself. You can contact me or your safety consultant. If you don't know who it is, I'll help you get to them. But the intent of this control program is to ensure that machinery and equipment is isolated from its energy source when work is being done. Okay, so the important elements of this program include procedures and periodic inspection and training. Start there. Okay, start with those 3 parts, and that'll be your shell. That'll be a good jumping off point for you. Analyze the different areas where you have hazardous energy. Analyze those, list those, develop procedures for each of those, and then work on the next phase. A good resource to help you with your procedures for locking out energy sources is who? Go ahead, tell me who. You got it right. Employees, the people actually doing the work, are the best ones to help identify where procedures need to be in place and help with the procedures. It's not a one-person job, okay? Let's talk about training. Training is required, and it has to be documented for all authorized, affected, and all others. So authorized are the persons who's performing the lockout tagout, performing the maintenance or repair. Affected is the person who will use the machine or be in the area when it's being serviced or repaired. And all others are those who would spot that tag or lock or both and know what it means. All 3 trainings need to take place, and they need to be documented. You need to do an equipment inventory. That's going to need your lockout tagout procedure. If it's either a process or equipment, all of that needs to be listed and inventoried. Okay. Now, remember, for each process or equipment, you have to have procedures. I've seen in my career, I've been doing this a little bit, I've seen people fined heavily for not having procedures for each and every piece of equipment. And the OSHA fines include every little piece of equipment. They don't blanket the fine. It's a citation for each piece of equipment that did not have procedures for them. So in compliance with this rule, 1910-147 is real important, folks, if you have hazardous energy in your facility. It's not hard. You can go on OSHA.gov and pull up the rule right there, follow it step by step. It tells you what to do, okay? Or if you have an OSHA book, the OSHA rules and regulations book, that's even better because that's right there. It tells you how to write procedures. It tells you how to do your training and how to document your training, what type of locks are standardized for this program. It's a good program to get your nose into, okay? It's a good rule to get your nose into. Now, periodic document inspections of your energy control procedures and devices need to take place. Now, OSHA doesn't tell you how often, but when they say periodic within the standard, it usually means annually. minimally. And the reason I say minimal is because it depends on the complexity of your operation. If your operation is more complex and you have a lot of equipment that produces hazardous energy, then you might consider doing more often than annual, okay? Because things change. There is an exception to this rule, and the exception can be implemented when you're making adjustments or minor repairs to equipment or machinery, when you can make the adjustment or repair without getting any part of your body or your clothing at or near the rotating parts or the point of operation. So if your body or your clothing can be 100% isolated from the energy source, then you don't have to lock out, tag out. That's the only exception. Okay? Okay. Okay. So let's get into the procedures of controlling hazardous energy and the key elements of your written procedures. Remember, I say this all the time. One person doesn't have to work alone on this. Partner up. This is a good light duty position. Also, it's good to get your employees involved with this. They're the ones doing the job. They need to help with this. Okay. They're going to know what it takes to shut this equipment down. So here's your lockout, tagout procedure steps. If you're not going to download this tomorrow or whenever from our resources widget, take a picture, okay? Lockout, tagout procedures have to be documented by the employer and utilized for the control of potentially hazardous energy, okay? You have to, the authorized person has to notify the affected employees and anybody else in the area that the machine or equipment will be shut down and locked out. They have to shut down the machine or equipment using the procedures and step by step and isolate the energy source with the energy isolating devices that are standardized for your company. Lock out energy isolating devices with assigned locks, and they have to be assigned to someone, not just any lock. Then they have to try to release or restrain the stored or residual energy, such as capacitors or pressure vacuums or blades that are still rotating, things like that. Then they have to test the equipment to make sure it cannot start up. So, and that would be using the normal startup procedure. So when authorized person are preparing for shutdown, they have to go by the steps for preparing and explain what the steps are. So during training, the authorized employees have to know that they have to locate all energy sources for that specific piece of equipment. That's done through your written procedures. And authorized employees must also inform affected persons that are about to start a lockout, tagout procedure. Communication here is key, and it's not a bad idea to document that communication. May seem like a lot, but could save a life, okay? Now, an orderly shutdown has to be utilized to avoid any additional or increased hazards as a result of equipment stoppage. Remember, you need specific written procedures for each piece of machinery or equipment to be serviced or maintained. I told you what could happen, right? So these procedures have to be followed each and every shutdown. So procedures will help to avoid accidents if utilized correctly. So let's talk about restarting the machine or restoring energy. Before the machine or equipment can be restarted or restored, authorized workers, remember, they're the ones who are doing the maintenance or repair, must remove everything, all the tools and the materials from the area, and they need to replace any machine guards that were removed. Authorized workers must let everyone in the area know that they're about to restart everything, and everybody needs to be cleared from the area until the authorized individual determines that it's safe to resume work. So also remember, only the person who applied the lock can remove the lock. The only exception to this rule is in the case of an emergency, and the authorized employee must be contacted, and that contact must be documented, and verification procedures must be in place and utilized. So make sure that you have written procedures for verifying that you are in contact with that person who applied the lock, okay? You cannot have a skeleton key or a master key for these locks. So if an employer has to remove a lock that someone else applied for an emergency, verification needs to be documented and in place, and you have to make sure it's cut off. You can't use a key to remove it, okay? Say okay. Now, affected employees are prohibited from restarting or re-energizing equipment, as you probably know by now. Only authorized employees can remove a machine from lockout, tagout, end of story. Affected employees cannot attempt to re-energize equipment that are locked out, tag out, okay? They cannot. Now, there are some situations that need attention. If you have a contractor coming into your facility and they need to lock out machines or hazardous energy, you as an employer need to review their program and make sure it meets or exceeds OSHA regulations, okay? Make sure it's going to meet or exceed your program. If it does not, they have to utilize your program to do lockout, tag out for that operation, okay? Remember that. When you bring contractors in, they have to still comply with lockout, tag out to keep your employees safe, okay? So you have to review each other's plan for that. We talked about this. I'm not gonna spend any more time on this. Just remember that you have documentation if you have to remove someone else's lock that apply, or someone who applied a lock. If you have to remove it in an emergency situation, please make sure you have the appropriate documentation prepared and verified, okay? Remember, you have to do a periodic inspection of this, at least annually, and it must be documented. It's performed by the authorized employee, other than the one using the procedures. So if you have more than one authorized employee, they should be inspecting each other's procedures. They're designed to correct deficiencies. So if there's a deficiency in the program that you find during the inspection, you're going to have to update your procedures, and guess what else? Yep, training. So anytime something is updated or changed, training needs to take place, okay? And remember, employer certification of the inspection is required. In other words, you need to document the inspection was done and sign off on it, okay? Now, training is part of your written plan and has to be implemented upon initial hire. Any change in assignments, any new equipment that requires lockout, tagout, or if the process changes, or if there's a change in procedures. Audits have to be done annually. Remember, audit is different than an inspection. You're going to audit your program, make sure it's still relevant. All the players are the same. All parts of the program are still there. That also has to be documented. So why should you review your written plan? You have to periodically review your plan. It ensures that it's still current and continues to help avoid workplace accidents and injuries. That's the bottom line. Even if the facility hasn't changed, it's possible that during the review process, you'll identify deficiencies that were not identified during the initial analysis. So it's important to periodically look at this and get another set of eyes on it as well. So some things I want you to remember, okay? Identify all of your hazardous energy sources, okay? This will probably be the hardest part, in my opinion. So do that, and don't rely on just one person to do it if you can help it. Establish an energy control program, which includes all the elements I gave you today, which were 3, okay? Start there, okay? And provide training and for authorized individuals, provide training for affected individuals, and provide training for anyone who would see a lockout tagout device and walk by and see it. It's important that everybody know why it's there. Also make sure, one thing I want you to remember is implement audit and inspection program procedures. Anytime you have a procedure in place for something that's written for someone to follow, the chances of steps being missed are minimized. Okay, so if you haven't already, now's the time to enter your questions into the interface. Okay, one question that I get often and I get throughout this program is, what if I need to cut off a lock, or what if in an emergency, I need to get that lock off of there? Can I just take it off as an employer? It's my workplace. Can I just take it off? And the answer is you can, as long as you have verified that the worker, the authorized person, is not in or around that machine, and nobody can be harmed by starting that piece of equipment up. That's why that's in place. The standard says the only person that can remove that lock is the person who's identified on the lock, except for an emergency. So make sure that you verify that in writing, okay? And the best thing to do is have a procedure for verification. So that's all I have time for today. Dan, thank you for your comment. I really appreciate it. And thank you for attending. And if you have anything else, please feel free to reach out to me at any time. And to keep apprised of all of our future stuff going on, go to our website, /events, and that'll tell you everything that we're doing or getting ready to do. We have some new stuff coming up this year. We're implementing some new stuff in the fall. I'm real excited about it. So I hope you keep tabs on what's happening on our website. So that's all we have time for. Thank you for attending. I'll see you at the next one.